You're nothing without me. You'll always be a failure. Her mother's venomous words echoed, a constant, debilitating refrain in my mind. For years, they chipped away at my soul, making me question my very existence. But the silence that followed on that grand stage, just before the symphony began, was deafening. It wasn't the silence of defeat, though. No. It was the calm before the storm, the hushed prelude to a truth that would shatter their carefully constructed world and expose the depths of a toxic parent's manipulation. If you've ever felt trapped by someone else's expectations, if you've ever been crushed under the weight of toxic parents, hit that like button right now. Share your story in the comments below. You are not alone. And subscribe to witness the ultimate comeback against those who try to define you. Growing up, my life was a meticulously choreographed performance. Every single note I played scrutinized, every small achievement belittled. I existed in the suffocating shadow of Evelyn Blackwood, my mother, a woman celebrated globally as a classical piano virtuoso, yet privately, a master of emotional abuse. She constantly told me my music was secondary, a mere echo of her own genius. She'd lean over me at the piano, her breath a cool whisper against my ear, correcting my posture, my fingering, my very interpretation of the masters. "That's not how I would play it," she'd intone, her voice dripping with disdain. "And you, my dear, are simply not me." It wasn't about teaching, it was about dominion. It was about ensuring I remained a perpetual understudy in her grand production, never daring to steal the spotlight. From the moment I could sit at the piano, my childhood was devoid of genuine warmth or encouragement. Instead, it was a relentless cycle of practice, performance, and public humiliation. At recitals, while other parents beamed, Evelyn would sit stoically, her gaze like a laser, dissecting every perceived flaw. Afterwards, in the privacy of our opulent yet emotionally sterile home, her critiques would begin. "Your dynamics were weak," she'd say, her voice devoid of emotion. "Your phrasing lacked conviction. Do you even hear the music? Or are you just mechanically moving your fingers?" Each word was a tiny shard, piercing my burgeoning self-worth. She constantly reminded me of her sacrifices, her talent, implying that my own existence was merely a backdrop for her brilliance. The pressure to conform to her impossible standards was immense, a crushing weight that stifled any genuine artistic expression within me. I inherited her extraordinary musical talent, yes, but along with it, I also inherited her insidious legacy of control and emotional suffocation. It felt like I was drowning in her shadow, constantly gasping for air. My only true escape, my solitary refuge, was a secluded rustic cabin nestled deep within Echo Valley. It was a place my grandmother, a woman I barely remembered, but whose spirit my quiet Aunt Sarah often spoke of, had left to me. My mother, Evelyn, had always dismissed the cabin as primitive, unrefined, and hardly fit for a Blackwood. Her disdain was a balm to my soul, for it meant she would never grace its humble threshold. And so, in that quiet, sun-dappled haven, away from the piercing gaze of my toxic parent, I secretly composed. The melodies that poured from me weren't polished or classical. They were raw, haunting, filled with the years of unspoken resentment, frustration, and pain. Each note was a defiant whisper, a quiet rebellion against the narrative Evelyn had forced upon me. I channeled all the stifled emotions, the suppressed identity, into powerful, evocative pieces that were uniquely mine. I was waiting, patiently, for the perfect moment to break free, to unleash this hidden arsenal of truth. Evelyn, with her unparalleled fame and influence in the classical music world, wielded her power like a weapon. She meticulously orchestrated every aspect of my early career, ensuring I received minor roles, often as her accompanist, or in obscure recitals that would never truly propel me forward. She'd advise influential concert organizers against booking me for solo performances, always with a subtly demeaning comment about my supposed lack of stage presence or emotional immaturity. She made sure I remained a perpetual understudy in her grand production, a minor character in her self-written epic. Her goal wasn't just to control me, it was to stunt my career, to ensure that the spotlight, always and forever, remained solely on her. My quiet aunt, Sarah, Evelyn's younger sister, would often visit. Unlike Evelyn, Aunt Sarah possessed a gentle, observant nature. She never openly criticized Evelyn, a silent pact, perhaps, to maintain some semblance of family peace. But her presence alone was a subtle comfort. Aunt Sarah would often share stories of my grandmother, a free-spirited artist who had carved her own path, defied conventions, and cherished her independence above all else. She spoke of my grandmother's love for the Echo Valley cabin, a place where she found her deepest inspirations. Unbeknownst to her, Aunt Sarah was unknowingly planting the seeds of defiance within me, nurturing the nascent thought that perhaps, just perhaps, I too could find my own voice and break free from the suffocating grip of my toxic parent. Every story, every shared memory of my grandmother's independent spirit was a tiny chisel chipping away at the walls Evelyn had built around me, preparing me for the ultimate confrontation. The stage was being set, not just for a concert, but for a reckoning. The turning point, the seismic shift that shattered my passive acceptance, arrived not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet, almost unassuming discovery. It was during one of my stolen retreats to the Echo Valley cabin, a place Evelyn, my toxic parent, would never defile with her presence. The air there always felt lighter, cleaner, less saturated with the weight of her expectations. I was cleaning out an old, dust-laden music box my grandmother had cherished, the one Evelyn had dismissed as sentimental junk. It was a beautiful, ornate thing, intricately carved, and as I gently ran my fingers over its aged surface, a loose panel gave way. Tucked deep inside, carefully folded and slightly yellowed with age, I found it. My grandmother's true, authenticated will. This wasn't the document Evelyn had paraded around for years, the one she claimed left everything, the sprawling estate, the valuable art collection, even her cherished grand piano, solely to her. No, this was an older, undeniably legitimate version, confirmed by a subtle, almost invisible notary seal and a specific archaic wax imprint that Evelyn's official will conspicuously lacked. This true will laid out a vastly different future. It clearly stated that the vast estate, including my mother's beloved grand piano, the very instrument that had been both a symbol of her dominance and my own personal prison, was to be divided equally between my mother, Evelyn, and myself. But there was a crucial stipulation, a clause that hit me with the force of a perfectly executed crescendo. I was to be given full creative control over any musical legacy related to my grandmother, and the specific instruction that the grand piano would transfer to whichever heir pursued an active musical career in classical performance. It was a direct, undeniable challenge to Evelyn's long-held narrative of sole inheritance and absolute power, a defiant posthumous whisper from a grandmother who, even in death, sought to empower me. But the will wasn't the only revelation. Tucked alongside it was a letter, handwritten on delicate stationery, from my grandmother herself. Her elegant script, so different from Evelyn's sharp, commanding hand, flowed with poignant honesty. It expressed deep regret for not having been stronger, for not having protected me more forcefully from Evelyn's tyranny, a tyranny she clearly recognized even from afar. The letter was a heartbreaking apology, but also a fierce rallying cry, urging me to find my own voice, to claim my artistic freedom, and to never let anyone, especially Evelyn, dim my light. Your music, it read, is your truth. Do not let it be silenced. This revelation wasn't just about money, though the financial betrayal was staggering. It was about something far more profound. It was irrefutable proof that my mother, Evelyn Blackwood, had systematically lied, cheated, and manipulated the legal system, defrauding me of my rightful share, and more importantly, of my artistic freedom. She hadn't just stifled my talent, she had stolen my birthright, both material and creative, constructing an elaborate edifice of lies to maintain her absolute control. The sheer audacity, the depth of her calculated deception, sent a jolt through me unlike anything I had ever experienced. The initial shock was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Then slowly, as the implications settled, it gave way to a cold, burning rage. It wasn't the kind of hot, volatile anger that explodes and then dissipates. No. This was a deep-seated, simmering fury, precise and unwavering, fueled by years of accumulated emotional suffocation. It wasn't just about the financial gain or the estate. It was about the lost years, the talent stifled, the identity stolen, the quiet moments of despair when I truly believed I was nothing. My grandmother's letter and will became not just documents, but a manifesto, igniting a fire within me that had long been banked. This was the moment I realized the only way to truly live, to truly breathe, was to fight back. Not with the uncontrolled anger I'd always suppressed, but with precision, with strategy, and with the very art form my mother believed she controlled. The weight of her lies, the crushing burden of her manipulation, had become unbearable. The truth, once uncovered, offered the only path to liberation. It shifted my perspective from one of passive endurance to active defiance. My entire life I had been an object of her control, a reflection of her ego. But now, armed with irrefutable proof, I saw a clear path to reclaim my narrative, my talent, and my destiny. The fear I had lived with for so long was replaced by a steely resolve. This wasn't just about winning, it was about exposing, about dismantling the facade she had so carefully constructed. The quiet musician was about to conduct her most important, most devastating symphony. It was time to make Evelyn Blackwood pay the piper, and I was going to ensure the entire world was there to hear it. The stage was set, and the score for my revenge was already being written in the depths of my newly awakened soul. My journey from victim to avenger, from shadow to spotlight, had just begun. My revenge wouldn't be a spontaneous outburst of anger. It would be a symphony, meticulously composed, each note placed with deliberate precision. The first, and most crucial step, was to secure the undeniable proof of Evelyn's deception. The original will and my grandmother's poignant letter, these were my trump cards. I didn't hesitate. The very next day, I drove straight to the office of Ms. Davies, a trusted lawyer I'd quietly engaged months ago for some minor estate inquiries. Ms. Davies was known for her meticulous nature and unwavering discretion, a perfect confidant for the intricate, sensitive task ahead. I laid out the documents, explained the years of manipulation by my toxic parent, and watched her stoic expression shift to one of quiet indignation as she processed the extent of Evelyn's fraud. Without a word, she opened her secure safe deposit box, placing the irreplaceable papers inside. The physical evidence was now safe, beyond Evelyn's reach, ready to be deployed at the opportune moment. With the legal foundation secured, I began a subtle, yet deeply strategic, campaign to gather allies. This wasn't about rallying an army, but assembling an orchestra, each person a vital instrument in my unfolding composition. I started by reaching out to musicians I knew, those who had, like me, suffered under Evelyn's demanding, often cruel, mentorship. There were whispers in the classical music community about her ruthless methods, her tendency to crush potential rivals. I contacted several former students and even a few colleagues she had professionally sabotaged over the years, all of whom had silently endured her toxic influence. My approach was carefully calibrated. I didn't reveal my full intent immediately. Instead, I proposed a collaborative tribute concert for my grandmother, framing it as an homage to her overlooked artistic legacy. This was a brilliant cover, a way to bring them into my orbit without exposing the true, explosive core of my plan. I spoke passionately about my grandmother's independent spirit, a stark contrast to Evelyn's suffocating control, subtly hinting at the darker undertones of the Blackwood legacy. Many of them, still nursing old wounds inflicted by Evelyn, readily agreed. They saw it as an opportunity to perform, to be recognized outside of Evelyn's oppressive shadow, and perhaps to subtly defy her without open confrontation. Each conversation was a carefully placed note in my composition, building a powerful, undeniable chorus. While inviting them to collaborate on the concert, I also quietly began collecting their testimonials. These weren't overt accusations, rather, they were detailed accounts of Evelyn's emotional cruelty, her professional sabotage, her insidious methods of undermining talent she perceived as a threat. One former student recounted how Evelyn had deliberately withheld a crucial recommendation letter, costing them a prestigious scholarship. A colleague spoke of Evelyn forgetting to inform them of a critical audition, then publicly shaming them for missing it. These were the details that painted a damning portrait of a toxic parent who extended her control far beyond her own home. I meticulously documented every story, every instance, cross-referencing dates and public events to build an unassailable dossier. This wasn't just about financial fraud. It was about the years of emotional abuse, the systematic crushing of spirits. Simultaneously, I started leaking anonymous snippets of my own, unconventional compositions. These weren't fully formed symphonies. They were short, mesmerizing pieces, shared discreetly on obscure, yet influential, classical music forums and niche online communities. The genius of this tactic was their subtle echoes of Evelyn's own distinctive style, her characteristic melodic motifs, but subverted with raw, untamed emotion, dissonances, and unexpected harmonic twists. They carried a palpable sense of pain, defiance, and fierce independence. The goal was twofold: to pique curiosity within the classical music world and to hint at a new, formidable talent emerging from the shadows, a talent intrinsically linked to the Blackwood name, yet unmistakably not Evelyn. I wanted to sow seeds of doubt, to create a buzz that she couldn't control, and to lay the groundwork for the ultimate reveal of my own, authentic voice. Every leaked note was a whisper of defiance, a prelude to the thunderous truth that was coming. My plan was taking shape, a multi-layered attack designed not just to reclaim what was mine, but to utterly dismantle the carefully constructed empire of a toxic parent. The game was officially on. The tribute concert, initially dismissed by Evelyn as a quaint, amateurish endeavor, began to gain unexpected traction. My carefully selected allies, each with their own quiet grievances against Evelyn, performed with a passion that resonated deeply with the classical music community. Word of mouth spread, fueled by subtle leaks about the unique programming and the enigmatic new sound emerging. Surprisingly, it started drawing significant attention, far more than Evelyn, the reigning queen of the classical world, was comfortable with. The buzz around an event she hadn't orchestrated, hadn't approved, and couldn't control began to unnerve her. I could almost hear her internal monologue, a discordant symphony of paranoia and ego. Simultaneously, my leaked compositions, the anonymous snippets echoing Evelyn's style, yet imbued with raw, untamed emotion, truly began to take hold. They went viral within niche music forums and online classical communities, sparking intense debate. Critics, always hungry for the next big thing, began to analyze them, dissect them, trying to identify their elusive origin. Some even suggested these might be lost works of a rebellious, genius student of Evelyn's, fueling her growing paranoia and hitting her precisely where it hurt most: her unchallenged artistic supremacy. The more they speculated, the more agitated Evelyn became. She thrived on control, on being the sole arbiter of taste and talent within her domain. This emerging, mysterious talent, seemingly connected to her legacy but beyond her grasp, was a direct threat to her carefully constructed image. Her reactions were swift, predictable, and utterly revealing. First, she tried to exert control over the concert's programming. Her publicist, a harried woman named Brenda, who always seemed on the verge of a nervous breakdown, called my lawyer, Miss Davies, demanding specific pieces be included, pieces that showcased Evelyn's own arrangements or compositions, and attempting to replace my collaborators with her own loyalists, musicians she could easily manipulate. She even subtly threatened to pull strings to revoke our venue booking. This was a classic Evelyn maneuver, a brazen display of her toxic parent tendencies, trying to commandeer anything that threatened her spotlight. But this time, it backfired spectacularly. Her attempts only solidified my allies' resolve. They had endured her tyranny for too long, and her transparent efforts to sabotage an event meant to honor my grandmother, a woman many respected far more than Evelyn, only exposed her manipulative nature to the broader musical community. The news of Evelyn's interference, subtly amplified by my network of well-placed whispers, spread like wildfire. The pressure mounted. Whispers of Evelyn's unprofessional conduct and bullying tactics grew louder. The tension became palpable, a taut string vibrating before a snap. Evelyn, now truly cornered, grew increasingly erratic. Her public composure, usually ironclad, began to fray. She started lashing out at her own staff, canceling public appearances, and her usually flawless performances showed subtle signs of strain. The media, always drawn to drama, noticed the shift, commenting on her uncharacteristic anxiety. The once unassailable toxic parent was showing cracks in her polished facade. She'd always relied on brute force and reputation to get her way, but now, faced with an invisible enemy and an increasingly defiant landscape, her usual tactics were failing. She became obsessed with unmasking the anonymous composer, convinced it was a deliberate ploy to undermine her. Her frantic search for the source of the leaks only pushed her further into a spiraling delusion, diverting her attention while I quietly, meticulously, finalized the last details of my grand performance. The trap was set, the bait taken, and Evelyn was walking right into it. Can you feel the tension building? That moment when the predator becomes the prey? If you're loving this unfolding drama, smash that like button and tell us in the comments, what's your favorite revenge fantasy against toxic parents? Don't forget to subscribe for the grand finale. You won't want to miss a single satisfying note. The stage was meticulously set. It was the night of the grand Grandmother's Legacy concert, held in the city's most prestigious concert hall, a venue Evelyn Blackwood herself had graced countless times. Every detail had been carefully orchestrated, from the lighting to the seating arrangement. Evelyn, oblivious to the meticulously laid trap, was seated prominently in the front row, an invited guest of honor, radiating her usual aura of self-importance. She believed she was attending a tribute to her mother, an event she had reluctantly tolerated due to public pressure. She was utterly unaware that she was walking directly into her own public dismantling, a meticulously planned humiliation orchestrated by the very person she had spent a lifetime trying to diminish. My final piece, the culmination of years of suppressed pain and simmering resentment, was the centerpiece of the evening, a complex, emotionally charged symphony titled Echoes of Truth. Its movements subtly, insidiously wove in familiar melodies from Evelyn's most famous repertoire, but distorted them. I infused them with jarring dissonances, unresolved tensions, and fragmented motifs, a chilling musical representation of my own distorted upbringing, a direct commentary on the toxic environment she had created. The beauty of her themes was twisted, reflecting the dark truth hidden beneath her polished facade. It was a symphony designed not just to be heard, but to be felt, to evoke the unsettling sense of something beautiful being fundamentally broken. Weeks before the concert, I had strategically placed anonymous articles in influential music journals and online publications. These pieces, crafted with the help of Ms. Davies to ensure legal safety, subtly questioned Evelyn's long-standing claims about her sole inheritance of my grandmother's estate and her undisputed control over my grandmother's entire musical legacy. They were carefully worded, posing questions rather than making outright accusations, yet they were potent enough to spark quiet speculation and generate significant buzz within the tight-knit classical music community. Is it possible, one article mused, that there's more to the Blackwood legacy than meets the eye? These whispers built a narrative, preparing the ground for the bombshell I was about to drop. The hall was packed. The air was thick with anticipation, a palpable hum of excitement from the audience, mingled with a faint, almost imperceptible tremor of unease. Everyone knew something significant was about to happen. Evelyn, despite her impeccable gown and regal posture, couldn't entirely hide her growing discomfort. Her tightly gripped hands, the almost imperceptible tremor in her usually unyielding jaw, betrayed a nascent fear. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the faces in the audience, searching for an enemy she couldn't quite identify. The music critics, alerted by the subtle leaks and the increasingly bold rumors, were poised with their notebooks, their pens hovering, sensing a story far grander than a mere concert. The moment was ripe. I felt a surge of exhilaration, a terrifying yet empowering sensation of absolute control. The years of silent suffering at the hands of my toxic parent were about to culminate in this single, devastating revelation. I had practiced this moment in my mind countless times, and now it was real. Every note, every carefully chosen word, was a step towards liberation. As the final crescendoing notes of echoes of truth faded into silence, the concert hall was momentarily still, captivated. The last mournful chord hung in the air, a profound question mark. Then, before the applause could fully erupt, before Evelyn could even gather her composure to claim any part of the moment, I stepped forward. I didn't bow. Instead, I walked to the very edge of the stage, directly into the spotlight. My voice, clear and steady, amplified by the hall's acoustics, cut through the hush. "This symphony," I announced, my gaze sweeping across the audience, momentarily settling on Evelyn's rapidly paling face, "is dedicated to my grandmother, who taught me the true meaning of legacy. A legacy not just of music, but of honesty and justice." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. This wasn't a typical post-performance speech. There was an unexpected tension in my voice, a subtle tremor of something far more profound than gratitude. Evelyn, in the front row, shifted uneasily, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. She leaned forward, a silent, predatory focus taking over her features. She still believed she held all the power, all the secrets. Then, I delivered the first devastating blow. "My grandmother," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "believed in truth. And it is in her name that I must reveal a truth that has been suppressed for far too long." On the large screen behind me, which had moments before displayed abstract, swirling visuals accompanying the music, I projected the first image, a high-resolution scan of my grandmother's true will. Its precise wording, the indisputable notary seals, and the clear division of the estate, including the grand piano, between my mother and myself, flashed for all to see. Gasps rippled through the audience. A few whispers turned into audible exclamations. The visual proof was undeniable. Before the audience could fully process this, I clicked to the next slide. The handwritten letter from my grandmother. Each poignant line, expressing regret for Evelyn's tyranny and urging me to find my own voice, appeared, large and legible. The words hung in the air, a direct indictment of Evelyn's toxic parent behavior, undeniable and deeply personal. The sheer intimacy of it, a grandmother's last plea, resonated far more powerfully than any legal document. And then came the final crushing blow. I projected meticulously compiled financial documents, cross-referenced bank statements, and legal correspondence meticulously prepared by Ms. Davies. These detailed Evelyn's elaborate scheme to defraud me: the fraudulent refiling of a falsified will, the diversion of inheritance funds, the systematic concealment of assets over decades. The evidence was irrefutable, painting a picture not just of familial discord, but of blatant, calculated fraud. Evelyn, her face contorted in a mix of fury and disbelief, finally snapped. "This is a lie! A desperate stunt!" she shrieked, half rising from her seat, her voice cracking with a raw, uncharacteristic hysteria. She tried to interrupt, to shout me down, but the sheer weight of the evidence on the screen, coupled with my calm, unwavering presentation, silenced her. The murmurs in the audience swelled into an undeniable roar. The music critics, already intrigued by the previous leaks, were feverishly scribbling notes, their faces alight with the realization that they were witnessing a monumental scandal unfold live. Photographers' flashes punctuated the darkness. Security guards, startled by Evelyn's outburst, moved to intercept her, gently but firmly, escorting her back to her seat. The truth, painstakingly hidden by my toxic parent for years, was finally exposed for all to see. The grand performance wasn't just my debut, it was Evelyn Blackwood's meticulously orchestrated downfall. The symphony of my revenge had reached its thunderous climax. The aftermath of that night was swift and brutal for Evelyn. The news of her deception exploded, reverberating far beyond the hallowed halls of classical music. Fueled by the prominent attendees who had witnessed her public unmasking and the undeniable evidence presented, her meticulously crafted facade shattered completely. Within hours, major news outlets picked up the story. The headlines screamed, "Virtuoso unmasked. Blackwood heiress exposes mother's decades of fraud." Social media was ablaze, dissecting every detail of the scandal. Her once impenetrable reputation crumbled, not gradually, but in a spectacular public collapse. Concert bookings vanished overnight. Endorsements from prestigious instrument manufacturers and luxury brands, which had long propped up her lavish lifestyle and image, were pulled with astonishing speed. The phone calls from her agent grew increasingly frantic, then ceased altogether. The public, once adoring, turned on her with a vengeance, fueled by the visceral sense of betrayal inherent in a family revenge story against a toxic parent. Then came the lawsuits. Ms. Davies, my lawyer, had meticulously prepared not only my case, but also laid the groundwork for others. Seeing Evelyn's public downfall as their long-awaited chance for justice, other wronged artists and collaborators quickly followed suit. Former students she had blackballed, colleagues whose careers she had sabotaged, all emerged from the shadows, emboldened by my actions. Each lawsuit piled on, a growing mountain of legal and financial ruin that Evelyn, for all her past influence, could not escape. The very empire she had built on lies and manipulation began to crumble under its own weight. And then, there was the grand piano. Once the central symbol of her dominance, positioned imposingly in her lavish living room, it became a poignant emblem of her defeat. After surprisingly little legal wrangling, the will was unassailable, and the fraudulent attempts to hide it clearly documented. The court legally transferred its ownership to me. Seeing it delivered to my quiet cabin in Echo Valley, its polished surface reflecting the sunlight, was a powerful, almost spiritual, reversal of power. It wasn't just an instrument. It was a tangible representation of my reclaimed legacy, a symbol that the art she had tried to control was now truly, irrevocably, mine. My recovery involved not just financial independence, but profound emotional liberation. The very first thing I did was establish clear, unyielding boundaries with Evelyn. Through Ms. Davies, I sent a formal cease and desist order, making it abundantly clear there would be no more contact, no more manipulation, no more attempts to exert her toxic influence over my life. The legal battles were long, dragging out for months, but ultimately, the truth prevailed, and Evelyn Blackwood, once seemingly untouchable, faced the full, crushing consequences of her actions. She lost everything: her fortune, her fame, her home, and ultimately, her carefully constructed identity. She was left with nothing but the ruins of her own deception. I finally moved into the Echo Valley cabin permanently, transforming it into a creative sanctuary. It was a place where my music could truly flourish, where every note I played was free from the crushing weight of her judgment, from the specter of my toxic parent. The silence there wasn't empty. It was filled with the promise of my own authentic sound. This wasn't just a win, it was a total reclamation. The path to healing wasn't linear. It was a winding, often challenging journey. But ultimately, it was profoundly transformative. With Evelyn's influence finally severed, I immersed myself completely in my music. The Echo Valley cabin became my sanctuary, a place where I could compose freely, exploring sounds and emotions I had suppressed for years under the oppressive weight of my toxic parents' judgment. There were no longer any external voices, only the pure, unadulterated melodies that poured from my soul. I experimented with genres, fused classical with contemporary, and discovered a unique artistic voice that was authentically, undeniably my own. Every note I played, every piece I composed, was an act of self-discovery and a testament to my newfound freedom. The Echoes of Truth concert, initially conceived as an act of calculated revenge, unexpectedly became my official debut. The raw emotion, the undeniable talent, and the powerful story behind it resonated deeply with audiences and critics alike. My career took off in ways I could never have imagined, but this time, it was built on authenticity and a genuine connection with my listeners, not on manipulation or inherited fame. I performed globally, sharing my story, and found that my experience with a toxic parent struck a chord with countless others who had endured similar struggles. My music wasn't just entertainment, it became a conduit for shared healing. But true healing extended beyond my personal triumph. I knew there were countless young artists, gifted and vulnerable, trapped in similar cycles of abuse or suppression. Drawing on my own painful journey, I established a foundation dedicated to supporting these emerging talents, providing them with scholarships, mentorship, and most importantly, safe spaces where they could develop their art without fear. We specifically focused on those from difficult family environments, offering legal and emotional support to help them escape the grip of their own toxic parents or guardians. It was my way of transforming my pain into purpose, ensuring that no one else would have to endure what I had. The message I carried forward in my work and my foundation was clear. The deepest wounds can be healed, and true strength lies not in suppressing pain or allowing it to define you, but in bravely facing it, transforming it, and ultimately using it to empower others. Resilience wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving, about rebuilding your life on a foundation of your own making. The grand piano, now occupying a place of honor in my sun-drenched studio at the Echo Valley cabin, stood not as a monument to past grievances, but as a vibrant symbol of renewed artistry, a testament to the power of a voice finally set free. It was a constant reminder that I had not only reclaimed my inheritance, but more importantly, I had reclaimed myself. This wasn't just a family revenge story. It was a profound journey of artistic liberation, of forging an identity independent of the trauma, and of finding oneself after escaping the suffocating grip of a toxic parent. The final notes of my personal symphony were not of anger, but of hope, healing, and the boundless possibilities of a life truly lived.